NFL decision makers had a very controversial ranking of Dak Prescott. We'll tell you if we agree or not next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is Landon McCool, and today's episode is brought to you by Kalshi. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use promo code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade 10. Kalshi, trade on anything. On today's show, we are talking about Brian Schottenheimer. Is he coaching for his job? We'll talk about where the Cowboys rank among the rest of the teams in the NFL. But Landon, I want to start with one of my favorite days of the year. The NFL decision makers put out their top 10 quarterback list. And what it turns into is just every fan base finding some obscure stat to make their quarterback look better than the quarterbacks that are ranked ahead of him. But having said all that, decision makers, general managers, head coaches, offensive coordinators rank the top 10 quarterbacks in the league going into 2026. And Dak Prescott came in at number 6. Do you feel like that's the right ranking for Dak?
I think it's pretty fair. I mean, I think if you think about, like, you kind of go through your head, you can make the list. And I think there's some areas where, I certainly prefer a method of tiering these guys. I think that's kind of cleaner way of doing this. So I think, stacking it like this, like, in a pure numbers way can sometimes be a little bit difficult. But I think, he's somewhere in that range of, 5 to 11 is probably where I mean, that's the kind of near the bottom of where I would put him. Just because I think, everyone's going to have their preference. I think style matters here because, he's not capable of necessarily doing everything as far as the run game. So if you're looking for that kind of quarterback, maybe you have that kind of preference. Maybe you rank him a little bit lower. But I think if you are looking for a guy that's cerebral, that reads defense as well, that can handle an NFL offense from front to back, can read a full field and do a full field progression in the pocket while navigating a tight space, I think he's probably one of the very best in the league. And so I certainly am not upset about this ranking.
So according to Jeremy Fowler, who does a great job putting this piece together, he said that nearly 75% of the ballots had Dak Prescott as a top 5 quarterback going into the year. And that's fascinating because at this time last year, Dak wasn't even ranked inside the top 10. And now there is, according to Fowler, a healthy gap between Prescott and the next quarterback on the list. And I tend to agree. So it was Josh Allen at 1, Patrick Mahomes at 2, Matthew Stafford at 3, Joe Burrow at 4, Lamar Jackson at 5, and then Dak Prescott at 6. And I think the argument that you can make for Dak is whenever he's healthy, the Cowboys almost always have a top 10 offense. In fact, most of the time when Dak is healthy for 12 or more games, it's a top 5 offense. And there's just very few quarterbacks that you can set your watch to where when they're on the field, they're going to have elite offensive performances. I think the biggest knock on Dak, maybe outside of some of the lack of playoff success, is the injuries, just because he hasn't been available a ton over the last 5 years. But that you could say the same for guys like Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson in that tier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, also besides Stafford, like, he really is the kind of one of the last of the old guard, right? Like, so if you need a quarterback that can do the kind of full load and run an offense on their own and be basically an offensive coordinator on the field when you need to in 2 minutes and be able to fully unleash an offense and squeeze the juice out of it by being able to get all the way through their reads and back. I don't think that there's a ton of those guys left in the NFL anymore because the NFL doesn't play like that anymore. So, or at least it does. Not all the teams do. So, like, there's capable ways of getting in these offenses and running. I think to what Cliff Kingsbury does, right? And the way those kind of offenses work, and they work that you can get yardage, but it's not. It certainly is. Playing to the strengths of a quarterback instead of, kind of opening up what's possible on an offense. And I think that's one thing that Dak can do is really take advantage and attack all areas of the field at the passing game.
I kind of miss that style of quarterback. And that's why I'm really
Yeah.
happy that Dak has kind of grown into this field general, because this is the style of quarterbacks that I grew up watching,
Yeah.
right? With like Troy. I mean, Troy Aikman's kind of the best example of this, and Tom Brady, and even Aaron Rodgers in the later stages of his career. We just don't have very many of these pure pocket passers. Drew Brees is obviously another one. It's really fun to watch when they can manipulate the defense. They can get everybody lined up. They know exactly how to attack certain defenses. They know where the hot routes at. We have a lot of really fun and exciting quarterbacks in the league. And maybe, Landon, this is why I always appreciate somebody like Joe Burrow, maybe more than the average NFL fan.
Yeah.
They are just so cerebral. And that's, to me, that's really fun to watch.
Well, they age well. That's the thing I think that's different than some of these other quarterbacks is that, as Dak gets older, he's, his health is a concern, but his play has gotten better. Like it's because he's seen it all. He knows what to do. And I think when you play that kind of quarterback, and you saw it with Tom Brady, like he was extremely effective all the way up until he just was not capable of navigating the pocket the same way that he was before. So I do think that there's something to that. And as we watch the Josh Allens and the Patrick Mahomes and the Lamar Jacksons and that generation of quarterbacks start to age out, I do wonder like how much as their games these are all incredible Hall of Fame worthy quarterbacks. I'm not doubting them, but I do wonder how well their games are going to age compared to Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and some of these other guys.
Yeah, and I have less concerns about Allen because I think he's starting. It's funny. Dak Prescott came into the NFL as like this dual threat quarterback who really transformed into a pocket passer. And I think Josh Allen is actually kind of doing a little bit of the same in Buffalo right now. I think Joe Burrow is always going to be that way. But you're right. I think Lamar Jackson was one of these guys. I believe he turns 30 this year. You wonder when the athleticism just dips a little bit, how he's still going to be an effective quarterback, but can he be an MVP candidate? I don't know. I did want to ask you this before we move on. Prescott is at 6, and to me, this feels like the very top of his ranking. I just have a hard time seeing him go a lot higher than this. But if it were to happen and he makes the top 5 or the top 4 next year, how do you think we get there?
I think he has another, close to 40 touchdown season. And I think that you see a guy that continues to be a more efficient player. I think I think that the step that I want to see him take in not only his quarterbacking, but in his playing within himself is the ability to let his and now that he has a team around him to do so, let his teammates do some of the work for him, because it's when he struggles is when he forces the issue at times when he needs to. And then at times when he doesn't, right? And I think part of having a quality offense around you is understanding when it's time to trust your teammates to know that they'll make the play for you and that you don't have to make this tight window throw. Let's make the 8-yard throw to Ferguson and see if he can bust through a tackle to get the first down.
The last thing that I would say for Prescott is just I think he manages the game very, very well, but just taking a step further in that direction. And it reminds me of a quote that Mike McCarthy had. Do you remember when Kellen Moore left and he said that Kellen Moore always just wanted to score as many points as possible? And we kind of made fun of that. Like, yeah, that's the offensive coordinator's job. But I think the idea that McCarthy was saying is, hey, yes, it's fun to go out there and score 40 points, but the goal is to win the game. And I think there were times last year where they were playing so fast because that's the style of football that Dak is really good at. We would like to see them play more of this, not a ton, but just more ball control, 7, 8, 9 minute drives where you're taking, you're having 14 play drives, you're keeping your defense off the field, and then you're ending it with a touchdown. I just think doing that a little bit more often could really help Prescott in terms of managing these games better.
Last thing I'll say before we move on. I mean, how many times last year did you feel more comfortable being down knowing Dak Prescott was taking the ball versus being up and having 4 minutes left to go, maybe by only 1 score, and relying on the Cowboys offense to kill that clock? I think that's partially about the run game we've talked about, but you're right. Part of it is about game management, about being efficient and making the right throws at the right time to understand that, hey, it's not about scoring points here. It's about getting first downs and milking the clock on your way to scoring points.
All right, let's talk about where the Cowboys rank going into the 2026 season, because it might surprise you. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Indeed Sponsored Jobs. When workplace chaos hits and you need the right hire, Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps connect employers with candidates who match needs like skills, certifications, and location, so less time gets spent searching and more time gets spent finding the right fit. People are finding quality hires on Indeed right now. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have already made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results. And when you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium status that it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Don't forget to check out the Everydayer Club, where you can get ad-free episodes of our show, plus exclusive Discord server access, where you can come chat about the Cowboys all day long. Just go to lockedoncowboys.supercast.com to join the club. All right, Landon, we're going to be discussing where the Cowboys rank among all of the teams going into the NFL season. But first, we've got a special clip from Michelle Majuk from the Locked On Big Board podcast, where she discusses her ranking of the Cowboys going into the 2026 season.
Now at number 14, I'm going with the Dallas Cowboys, which it's a scary ranking. I'm not going to lie, right? The Cowboys, they're a hard team to trust. That's for sure. 7-9-1 last year. Don't love Brian Schottenheimer as a coach at all, but this team is too good to not be at least a playoff contender, to like be fighting for a playoff spot. Last year, they already were number 2 in total yards recorded on offense, behind only the Rams. And that was remember, CeeDee Lamb was hobbled for a chunk of last season. I like that they re-signed Javonte Williams, who looked really good in his first year with the team. I think that was needed to have just a consistent running back there. They franchise tagged George Pickens, so he'll still be here for at least this year, depending on what they do with that extension or not. But this offense is too good to only be winning 7 games. And like the Bengals, a big reason the Cowboys lost so many games last year was their defense was absolutely atrocious. I mean, they ranked bottom 3 in most categories across the board. And what did they do this offseason? They focused everything into fixing their atrocious defense. One, the biggest thing they needed to do, get rid of Matt Eberflus. Who hired him anyways? Don't hire Matt Eberflus, guys. They go and hire Christian Parker from the Eagles. We'll see if he could do better. He can't do worse. That's for sure. They trade for Rashawn Gary to go with Quinnen Williams and Kenny Clark, who they added last year. They trade for D. Winters, linebacker from the 49ers. Is he elite? No, but he's an average starter that can be trusted more than the guys they had to play last year. They are able to draft Caleb Downs at number 11 overall, which feels like a steal at safety. He's going to be, I think, an amazing player in the NFL. Then they have another first-round pick later in the draft and take an edge rusher there in Malachi Lawrence. They will have 2 different starting safeties this year in Caleb Downs, and then also they signed Jalen Thompson in free agency. Also added PJ Locke from the Broncos. They add a corner in Kobe Durant from the Rams. And then remember last year, Deron Bland, yes, he played, but he was playing through a lingering foot injury, was not himself, had surgery this offseason to try to fix that issue. This defense could really make a massive turnaround. I think even more than the Bengals. The thing with the Bengals is I trust Burrow and Jamar Chase and that offense a little tiny bit more than Dak and the offense. Really, in that, I mean, I don't trust Zach Taylor either, but Brian Schottenheimer is really the issue here for me. I think overall the Cowboys are going to be fighting to win the NFC East. And I'm not going to be shocked if they do and make the playoffs this year, but I'm at 14. They can definitely climb up my rankings pretty early in the season if they show me that they fix up their defense early on in the year.
All right, Len, we're going to talk about Brian Schottenheimer in just a second. But first of all, do you agree with Michelle's ranking of the Cowboys in that 14 range? And again, she mentioned that it could be slightly higher, but what 7 teams in each conference make the playoffs? That means a fringe playoff contender. Does that make sense to you?
I mean, it's certainly in range, right? Like, look, I would put them higher because I feel more confident, and obviously maybe we have a little bit more insight than maybe even Kate and what's going on here with the Cowboys. But I think she, when you're looking broadly about the across the NFL, I think that's a fair spot to put the Cowboys because you just have a lot of unknown with the defense. And that specifically is where maybe we have our little bit more insight, gives us a little bit more confidence about how to feel about this defense. But I think, look, putting them as a fringe playoff team right now, after what you saw on this field last year, I think that most people on the outside are feeling pretty decent about what the Cowboys did to improve this defense. But I also think that most people have, thought about the Cowboys as contenders before and have been burned by that fact. So I think this is a fair rating. I would obviously rank them higher.
I don't think this is a disrespectful ranking, just to be clear, because you're talking about a top 15 team.
Absolutely not.
You're in that range where, you could be one game outside the playoffs, but you could easily win your division and be the 3rd or 4th seed in the NFC. So to me, that makes sense. And I understand the questions with the defense. Like, yes, they've added a lot of new names and new faces, but there is a concern that maybe it's going to take them until Thanksgiving to really gel. And at that point, are you too far out of the playoff race? Is the offense able to overcome that? Again, I think there are questions, but do I think they're a top 15 team at least going into the season? I do.
Yeah. I mean, I think just because, like, look, I mean, they were able to pull that record together. I mean, I think everyone kind of looks at it like that. They had that incredible offense and they were able to only muster 7 wins. I would look at it as that they had that incredibly terrible defense and they only lost 9 times. So
I know.
I think if they can, the bar for what they have to do to improve the defense is low. Like it's not like it's a difficult bar to clear. Now, I think it scales much like we've talked about. Like, the better that defense is, the better I think I feel confident about in the confidence rating about this team, right? But I think if the bar to clear where they were last year, I think that they should be able to clear it if they just. I mean, if the players that were on the team last year simply just play up to their own normal capabilities, I think that likely happens.
The other part of it, and I know if you're really doing a lot of deep diving into this Cowboys team, you can get really scared off by the schedule, right? It's one of the hardest schedules in the league. But I just think about like the divisions they played last year. So they played the NFC North, which is widely considered one of the best divisions in the league, right? They lost to JJ McCarthy in Minnesota. They tied Green Bay. They got killed by Detroit, and they got killed by Chicago, right? In the AFC West, they played the Broncos, which they lost. They lost to the Chargers. They beat the Chiefs, and they beat the Raiders. So you won 3 games out of the division, 2 games out of the division, right? Like, to me, it's just not that big of a deal because I could easily see them going 4-4 in the 8 division games that they play outside of their own division this year. I think if you're stressing out about the division stuff and the schedule here in July, I just think you're missing it too much because so much of it changes, right? Nobody knew at this time last year that the Chiefs would be a pretty bad football team. Nobody knew that Chicago was going to be one of the best teams in the NFL. I'm just not stressing about that part yet.
I mean, if you had told us before the season that we were looking at that back-to-back week where you played both, you played both Super Bowl champions in 11 days or whatever it was. And it was like, and you're like, if you had told me that we were going to win all those games, I would have laughed you out of the building, but they did. And crazy stuff happens, man.
Yeah. And then on the flip side of that, you lose to Jacoby Brissett and the Cardinals.
Yeah,
who had, I think,
exactly.
the 3rd worst record in the league. They lost to Carolina in Carolina in a game that they probably shouldn't have lost. Like, the NFL's weird. It's a very, very strange game. I just like the talent of this team on offense. And if they can just be not embarrassing on defense, I think they can get to 8 or 9 wins, because Landon, they probably should have gotten there last year. Like, if they didn't absolutely tank in week 18, which good job Cowboys for tanking, they would have had 8 wins last year. The bar is so low for them.
Yeah, and I also think, look, I mean, they have a lot of things kind of going their way that weren't going their way last year, right? Like, there's a lot of symmetry, a second year in this offensive system, the kind of continuity, the kind of quiet offseason that, frankly, we didn't want to even talk about out loud because it's been so nice. And I'll knock on wood as I say it, but I'm saying, like, there's a lot of positives, things that are actually, like, looking good that, at this point last year, I feel like we were holding our breath about it.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about Brian Schottenheimer, who enters, believe it or not, a pretty pivotal year 2. We'll talk about Shotty next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Lana, I've got one simple question for you to close out the show. Do you think Brian Schottenheimer is coaching for his job in 2026?
I don't. I think it depends. I think it depends on obviously how this all plays out. And I think we all knew that I was going to answer that way. But I think for the most part, barring absolute collapse and disaster, I feel like he will likely get another opportunity, at least one more year of opportunity, just because I do think that, despite, and look, I mostly agreed with what Kate said about, rankings. Again, from an outsider perspective, Michelle said about what the rankings, because for the most part, like, from an outsider's perspective, like, when you take a step back and look at the league wide, I can see that there's just a lot of uncertainty around this team. But I sort of push back a little bit on Schottenheimer of it all, because, again, as she even pointed out, like, Eberflus was an albatross around this team, right? And the defense writ large, it wasn't just Eberflus, but all of the defense. And I think he had less to do with that than a lot of head coaches do with their defensive coordinator. That was a lot chosen for this by this front office. So I think the aspects in which Schottenheimer had control of this team, he did a really good job. I think, including assembling what seems to be a very good offensive staff, getting the roster ready to go. I think there's some, in-game stuff that we can quibble with, but I think you can do that with every single head coach. I think, and he was able to do that while also being an offensive coordinator who was innovating and calling solid games. I mean, he had good game plans. He modernized an offense that still also seemed extremely familiar for Dak, so he could operate it well. I just think that he had to do a lot of different things last year. And did he accomplish all of them? No, he probably didn't, but he accomplished 8 out of 10. And for a guy who has never been a head coach before, I thought, let's give him a little bit more control and see what he does this year. And if he falls on his face, I think it depends on how badly he falls on his face. But ultimately, I think that, it's short of absolute disaster, he's probably deserved at least one mulligan.
Just to be clear, Michelle is a 49ers fan. And where did Matt Eberflus get hired this year? By the San Francisco 49ers.
Tough, Michelle,
you could tell by her tone that she was not excited about that hiring.
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I do think Schottenheimer is coaching for his job, just because if this team has another 6 or 7 win season, that would be your 3rd year in a row missing the playoffs. He's been a part of this team for more than 2 years. It's not like this is his 2nd year with the franchise. Like, he's been there for a while now. And I do wonder if this team falls flat on their face, despite all the investments they made on the defensive side of the ball, the offense being one of the league's most expensive units in the NFL, I do wonder if we could see Jerry Jones, and he typically doesn't do this. Like, he likes to give coaches a long runway, pull in for a more experienced head coach, somebody that he thinks that could, jumpstart this team, maybe his version of Mike Vrabel. We can agree or disagree whether that would be the right move, but I just don't know if you're the Cowboys, if you can afford another non-winning season, considering all of the investments you've made in this roster.
Yeah, I mean, I think I certainly could see that point of view, and I certainly could see Jerry getting impatient with this situation for a large degree. I also think that more than I've expected at times this offseason, there has been moments where I feel like they have been preparing for more of a 2-year window than just a 1-year window. And that's not what I've been prescribing. That's not what you've been prescribing.
Well,
but
what happens? What happens if this year they just don't take any kind of step? Like they could have a 2-year plan, but I think the assumption is, okay, hey, we're going to be a playoff team this year, and 2027 is when we really crank it up to be a championship caliber team.
I think that the circumstance matters, right? Like, the all the defenses of hires just fall flat in their face. Did because I'm not saying that Schottenheimer gets a pass there. I'm saying the opposite. Like, did Schottenheimer screw up the defensive coordinator hire? Because that's where, again, when we talked about this up front, it's like they give you enough rope to hang yourself, right? Yeah. Like, now now this is your move. So if it didn't work, it's on him. So I do agree. Like, if there is a disaster, then yeah, like, I think that there's also a difference between there can be a wide gamut of 7 and 9 seasons, right? Like, you can go 7 and 9 and look like feel very hopeful about where this team is going to be next year and the direction of the team, and you go 7 and 9 and feel like this team needs to be broken apart and sold for the pieces. So I do think the specifics here matter. You're not wrong, though. I do feel like maybe Jerry is more likely to pull the trigger early on this situation than he would in others, because he's feeling Father Time creeping up on him a little bit.
All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. As training camps get closer and moves are being made, host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.